Alright, so for this assignment we're going to start with a new document in Illustrator. There we go. And we need this resolution to be 1280 by 720. Now we could just go into the sizes here and choose that. Once we've chosen up here film and video, we could choose a size from there, or we could just type it in. Now we also want to make sure it's landscape and not portrait. Also RGB. No, we can't bring in CMYK, just as a point to note. Okay, so get rid of that. Window, view. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to keep my text box inside here. So we're going to create a piece of text. About that big should be good. I'm just going to put text 1. And then I'm going to make the size big enough, kind of fills that box. Now all of this can be adjusted later, so this is all just placeholder right now. There we go. So it says text 1. Now I'm going to create a rectangle around it. Alright, now I can't see my stuff, so I'm going to go to my color here, and then using the object arrange, send to back. There we go. So now my text is on top, my box is on the bottom. Alright, so now I can grab this, and I'm just going to hold down Alt and drag it down. Now I want it to go straight down, so if I hold Shift also, there we go. Eventually it will snap right to underneath it. Now I want to leave a little bit of room right there. Nothing too big, just a little gap. Now to get to the next one to be evenly spaced, I could just Alt Shift drag it down, but I can also just use Control D, and that'll step and repeat my stuff. Now I am hanging off the edge a little bit here. I want to make sure that I'm right on. So I'm just going to grab everything, hit the E key, and then scale this in. Now I am holding Shift, so it constrains it. There we go. I'm just going to nudge it over manually, just so I'm within that box. Okay, it's not a huge deal, because we can always adjust it in After Effects, but I just like to be within that box. All right. So there we go. Now if I wanted to have 5 of these or 10 of these or 100 of these, I could add those very quickly. Okay, so I'm going to go to my layers now, and I need each one of these to be on a separate layer. So this one's already on a layer. This one I'm going to click Create New Layer, and then I'm going to drag the little blue swatch to that layer. I'm going to drag this one, drag the little blue swatch to that. Oops. And I click New Layer. There we go. Drag this one, New Layer, drag the little blue swatch to that one. Okay. So now I have these, but they're out of order. So here's 2, 3, 4, and 1. So I'm just going to make sure 1 is at the top. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Now I'm going to rename these 2. I don't want this to be layer 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't want it to be 1, 2, and type of 2. 3, 4. Okay, so now I can just save this. And I put it into my work, titles, SignFlipping, whatever you want to call it. SignFlips 001. Okay, so there's my text in here. I can edit this always. Go back to After Effects. I'm going to import my SignFlipping 001. And there it is. Okay, I'm going to change this to composition retain layer size. Hit import. Double click that. And now I should have 1, 2, 3, 4. There's my layers that corresponded to my other area. Okay, so there it is. Perfect, wonderful, beautiful. Now what I want to do is, if I didn't have this color fill in here, it would actually show up totally black. Okay, so if I went to this and I grab each one of these, not that, that. And I chose just a stroke for this, and I saved it. When I went back to Illustrator, or to After Effects, you'll see that we just get these red boxes, but now our text looks like it's gone. It's not gone, it's just transparent, okay? The box is basically showing black because that's the background. And my text is black, so that's what we're seeing. So if I go to my composition settings, and I change my color to something like that, you'll see how we can then see the text, okay? So it's an important thing to note too that if you have no fill in Illustrator, that will translate into After Effects also. So it's kind of an important thing because sometimes you may want transparency and sometimes you may not want transparency, okay? So for this, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to leave it the way it is because again, we could edit it. All right. So now that we have this, text 1, text 1, text 1, text 1, I'm going to focus my efforts on one of these, okay? So just this first text 1 here. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to go to my rotate. Now what I want to do is be able to rotate it in a 3D sense. And really my rotate right now just lets me do that, okay? So I'm going to come down to here. I'm going to turn my switches and modes until I get to this bar, okay? This bar here has a magical button right there at the end that says 3D layer. When I click it, my rotate now has 3 rotations here and an orientation there. And now if I go through and rotate, okay, that one looks pretty much the same. Ooh, look at that one. And then go to X rotation, and look at that one. Okay? So you can see how we can get a different look to this just by simply enabling 3D mode and then rotating it in 3D. So what I need to do now is this is a sign, and the hinge for the sign is going to be way up top here. So I need to move my pivot for the sign to the very top. Okay? Now that's on all of these. So all of these objects need to have their pivots put at the very top. And all these need to be a 3D layer. Okay, so I've checked 3D for all of them. There it is. And I'm going to go into my anchor point, and then I can just slide the anchor point down. There it is. Now that does adjust where they were positioned, so I can hit P, and then I can adjust their position. Now I can't see where that box is, so if I go to my title action safe, there it is. So I know that I was pretty close to the top of this, so I can always just scoot it right about there. Okay. Now again, I could always adjust this later. Eventually this could be something that's pre-composed, so then it can just be moved wherever I want it to be moved. Turn off my title action safe, and we're good. Okay. So now we have our text. So I'm going to focus on my animation efforts all on one of these. So text number 1. So this one, I'm going to go to my rotate. It gave me an 8-second thing here. I'm not going to need 8 seconds for this first one. I'm just going to zoom in a skosh. And I'm going to figure out which direction I'm rotating. So just like that. Okay. So I'm going to start it back here. I'm going to start it rotated back like this. So you can't even see the sign. Then I'm going to hit a keyframe stopwatch thingy do. I'm going to go up to about 7 or 8 frames. I'm going to rotate it down. Okay. Then we'll watch it. Okay. So obviously that works. But it's pretty boring, right? A sign wouldn't just go boop and then be there. What we'd actually want to happen is the sign goes past it. Okay. Now you have to kind of use your imagination because the 3D is not actually 3D. It's just kind of like a fake 3D. So we just have to make sure it looks like it's swinging past it, and that's what it looks like it's doing. It's swinging past that point. Then I'm going to go up to a little bit further, and then this is -48. Okay. So my next extreme, I'm going to go this way and go to maybe 35. And then I'm going to go up a little bit further, and I'm going to go down to 25. Then I'm going to go up a little bit further, and then I'll pull this back to like 10. Okay, so I'm basically swinging on each side of this until I get it kind of locked in to a nice little animation, right? So this is, that's all within 1 second, so it's going to go very quick, but I can adjust it. Okay, so you can see how it moved. There we go. So I'm just going to pull these apart a little bit. So a little bit here. Now progressively these keyframes should be getting closer together. Okay, because it's going to take longer at the beginning to move because it's moving further, and then shorter and shorter and shorter. So it's just something to keep in mind as you're working. Alright, so let's see. Alright, so that doesn't look too bad. Alright. Now, it's all linear right now, so nothing's really blending together. It's just like one constant speed here, 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 here. Okay? So I'm going to grab all of these. I'm going to right-click, Keyframe Assistant, and do Easy Ease. Okay? And you'll see that we get a little bit smoother motion now between these keyframes. So now it actually looks like it's kind of swaying a bit better than it was before. Alright, and I can still adjust this if I need to, maybe pull some of these a little bit further apart. You don't want to go too far because then it's going to look too slow. It'll look like a rusted sign that has a very hard time moving. Okay, so now let's rewind this. There we go. So that doesn't look too bad. Alright, so that's good. Alright, now again, we could go into the graph editor and tweak this further if we needed to, but I think I'm happy with the way that's looking. So I'm going to rewind. I'm going to grab my X rotation, because that's the one we rotated, and I'm going to copy it. Then I'm going to go to 2, 3, and 4, and I'm going to hit Control V to paste it. Okay? So if I turn all these on, you can see what we get. Okay? Now, one thing to kind of note is that this one you can see a lot more of than that one. Because this is kind of like a 3D world, this is lower down, so we're seeing it from a different angle. So it's not going to be a huge deal, because once it's all put together, we won't really see that stuff happening like that. Okay? So now we have all of these kind of rotating nicely, but they don't look like they're connected. Okay? They look like they're independent signs flapping down. Now this is something that you could actually do, have these things flap down and then offset them and make it look different. Make it look like a panel or something, kind of like Mystique's panels on her skin, right? So you could do something like that. But in this case, we're not going to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, after all the things are done rotating, there we go, and I'm going to go to, this is way past it, so I'm after, you know, a second here. I'm going to go to my very bottom one, and I'm going to say that the parent, see this parent tab here, and if you don't see the parent tab or any of the tabs that I ever click on, you know, just click on these buttons down here, and eventually you'll get to where they're at. Okay, you can also right-click and choose columns to show parents or keys or in and outs or whatever. All right. So for this number 4 one, I'm going to say that it's parented to number 3. Okay, and then number 3 is going to be parented to 2, and number 2 is going to be parented to 1. So what that means now is that when number 1 moves, number 2 is going to follow it. And when number 2 moves, 3 is going to follow. When number 3 moves, 4 is going to follow it. So now if we rewind this and play, you can see the kind of animation we get, where they all just kind of come down together like that. Okay? So now it looks like one big kind of like connected sign. You know, it doesn't really look like it's individual pieces of a sign. Okay? It still looks cool and it has its application. Having these transparent, you definitely get a different look than if they weren't, just so you can see it. If I grab these, I'm going to flip my transparency so I have a fill. I'm just going to save it, jump back to After Effects. And so you see how we get just a different look because now we're not seeing through these at all. Okay, so that looks pretty cool. Now the next step of this is just offsetting. So I'm just going to go in here and try to figure out when the best time for number 2 to come in. Okay, so here goes number 1 like this. So I'm going to pull number 2 maybe about there. Maybe not there. I'm going to go a little bit back more. Okay, now this is where you have to kind of play with it a little bit to get your desired results. There we go. So that looks much more pleasant. Let me set my work area. Okay, now moving these around will give you different results because where these things come in will affect the ones below it and above it and all that other stuff. So if I put 2 a little bit closer like this, and 3 a little bit closer, and 4 a little bit closer, you can see the kind of results we get. It looks like it's actually like flipping right at the camera, right there. Okay, you can see where it's flipping right at the camera. So just by pulling some of these back some, I'll like exaggerate it more. Just go like crazy with this. Okay, now it looks weird because the motion of number 1 doesn't really match number 2 coming down. Okay, so it just looks funky. So that's why you have to kind of play with this to find that sweet spot of where this works. Okay, and the biggest thing is just looking at the motion. So looking at number 1 only, as number 1 swings in like that, you know, you could say, okay, well at that point it's kind of 2 should be right behind it. So as it gets to about here, that's where maybe 2 should come in. So that comes in here, and then here comes 2. And the same thing for 2. Maybe right about there is when 3 is going to come in. And then right about there is when 4 comes in right there. Okay, good. Now let's see. Oh. And I'll pull them back a little bit further. Maybe just 2 frames each. Nope, that's too quick. Let's go 4 frames. Okay, so this is 8, and this will be 12. Right. I think I'm like right in the middle. 3, 6, and 9. So I'm going to the 3 marker, the 6 marker, and the 9 marker. There we go. So that looks pretty good. Okay, so again, it's all going to depend on your animation as to where that sweet spot is. Might be sooner, might be later, might be whatever. So that's what we're doing. So now it's just a matter of replacing the text. So we can have this be anything. Pizza, steak, tacos, burritos. I don't know why, but pizza isn't pluralized. Pizzas, steaks, tacos, and burritos. Pizza, steak, taco, burrito. It's a weird menu, but we'll go with it. Okay, and then of course we can pick different colors to make things match. Obviously these colors are horrible right now. It's just a matter of us kind of getting some basic colorations in here. All right. So now that we have this, then we can go on to the next stage of lighting this thing out. Okay. So if we go into the layer new, you'll see that we have a couple things that are inside here. One of them is a camera. So if I create a camera, I'm in here right now looking at the camera. My active camera is camera 1. It just says whichever one you've picked, active camera. And it doesn't really look any different. Okay. Now if I go over here to my camera tools, there's unified camera tool, orbit, track, and track XY and track Z. So if I go to my orbit and I click and drag, I can actually spin around this object so that when I play my animation, I can see it from a different angle. Let's slide this down like this. Okay, so I'm moving that like that, and then I can also go here to my track, which is zooming in and out, and zoom in and out. I can also go to my unified camera tool, and this is actually all of those kind of mixed in. So left clicking and dragging is your orbiter, and then alt clicking and dragging, oops, sorry, right clicking is zooming in and out, and then middle clicking is moving it left and right. Okay, so you don't really need the other two, but they're nice to have because you can kind of don't have to worry about the other controls. All right, so you can see how I can move this thing around and get different looks to it. So if I'm putting this in a clip and I wanted it to look like it's actually like a 3D sign on a building, I can add that 3D sign on the building, and it'll look like it's in that same perspective. Okay, I'm just going to delete the camera for now. I can add that back in later. The other thing that's inside here is this light, and the light comes with settings. So let's call this main light. There's a spot, there's a parallel, there's a point, there's an ambient. The parallel is basically just like parallel lights. They're just like even lighting from one direction. A spotlight is a light that starts at one point and is like a movie theater spotlight where you're just shining in a cone shape. A point is like a light bulb, and ambient is just overall lighting. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it at spotlight. Here's the color. Or the fall off and all that stuff. We can change all of this later. I do want to click on cast shadows and hit OK though. Alright, so now that we have this, I'm going to switch back to my move tool, and I'm going to move this around, and you can see how we're lighting this specific object. Okay, now if I open up my properties here for my light, you'll see that I have a transform, which is very similar to the transform of any 3D object. And I also have the light options, and this is where we can change the intensity, change the color, change this cone angle. Okay, so if it's very focused or very spread out. Okay, here's the cone feather, so this is how soft that cone is going to be. Right now it's a very hard cone angle, so we're seeing that circle. Typically you want that to be soft. Here's the fall off, so this is the strength of the light itself. Okay. And then we can adjust the radius, our fall off distance. We're not seeing a whole lot of stuff here, but there is like stuff that's actually happening. Alright, now once we have this in here, I'm going to just adjust it a little bit. I'm going to rotate my light like that. I'm going to move the position like that. I do want to fill in the rest of this. Okay, so just so you can see what the other light is, this other ambient light. This is just like kind of a filler light. Okay, it just fills in the extra coloration throughout the entire scene evenly. So I still wanted my point light, but I didn't want everything else to be black. That's how I could do that. Okay, but you can change it here. Now it's another spotlight. And I can move it around, change the intensity, whatever. Alright, so don't feel like you're like locked into specific settings of a light. You can always change these things afterward, just like drawing it in Illustrator and then coming back in After Effects. I'm just going to duplicate this light. We can just duplicate it. I can just pull it down and maybe over a little bit. Okay, and I think I'm going to take these intensities down and get a little bit of a hot spot right in the center. Oops. And it is going to take some time for these to update, so don't be surprised if it runs a little bit slower. There we go. Alright, cool. So now what I can do is I'm going to just collapse this, and this, and this. Alright, so now that we have these objects here, you'll see that I turned cast shadows on. And we're not really seeing any like big effect like I would expect. There's a shadow back here. Well, right now there's no 3D object back there. 3D objects interact with 3D objects. They don't interact with just regular stuff. Okay. So if I were to create a brand new solid here, just so you can see it, and I made that solid blue. There it goes. Just running really slow now. That solid is not affected by the lights. Okay, when I turn 3D layer on, now it's affected by the lights. And you'll see that my text actually goes away. Okay? Because we're working with 3D, we have to work with the depth of it. And right now the blue plane here is in probably the same proximity as these. And so they're just kind of like hidden. Now as I hit play, you'll see them pop through and then pop back. Okay? Obviously it's not something we'd want to happen. So if I go to my blue solid, I hit P for position, and I just push it back in the Z direction. Now as these things come in, they're going to be in front of it. Okay? So let me create my camera again. And that's wonderful for now. I'll go to my camera tool, and I'll spin around, and you can see there it is. There's a definite distance here to there. Before, if I go back to that position, and I reset it to 0, you can see how it's right on top of it. Okay, so that causes that, you know, the stuff not to show up. So we just push it behind it, and we're good. Delete my camera again, so I don't need it at the moment. So now what I want to do is I want to scale that blue solid up to fill my screen. There we go. Okay, so now we have that blue solid there. Again, pictorial colors. Let's go and pick some better colors. There we go. That's better, not good. Okay, so now if we look at these items, now that they're 3D, we also get some other options. We get this material options here. So you can see one of the material options is cast shadows. So right now these, even though we told the lights to cast shadows, these objects are not casting shadows. So if I turn it on, there you go. Now this object is going to cast a shadow. So all of these lights here are casting that shadow. Alright, now these lights are kind of getting in my way of seeing everything. So what I want to do is go to View and go to my View Options. And in here I can say that my Spotlight wireframe is only when selected. Okay, so if I select it, then I'll see the full thing. I don't need to see the full thing. Alright, so now you can see that each light is casting a shadow for this specific object. So I have 1, 2, 3 shadows for that object. So if I come down to my next layer, and I open up its material options, and I say cast shadows, now that one has 3 shadows. If I go to 3 and 4, there we go. So now we have 12 shadows, 4 times 3, for these items. And as these things move, you can see the kind of horrible look of this entire thing. Okay, so we don't always want everything to have shadows, even though in the real world we would have shadows, you know, for every single light typically. So what I'm going to do is on each one of my lights, I'm going to choose which ones have shadows. So I only want one of these to have shadows. So my main light, I'm going to say you're going to have shadows. My other 2 lights are not going to have shadows. Okay, now it still looks pretty rough. It's a little bit too crisp for that light. So if I go to my main light and I open it up, and I go to my shadow diffusion and pull this up, that will spread out the shadow. So it doesn't look as hard. It's thinking, it's thinking, it's thinking. There it goes. Okay, so now we can see that the shadows look much nicer, much softer. Alright, now I'm getting some weird black lines coming in here, and that's again just my lighting, because my lights are not really hitting those spots like that. So I'm going to take my main light and pull it up, and then go to the rotate for it. Rotate, and rotate it downward. There we go, like that. Okay, I'm also going to make this maybe a little bit bigger cone angle. Just kind of spread it out. And I typically like to have a big cone angle for a lot of my lights, because it just helps kind of blend things together a bit more. There we go. So you can see now we're not getting those really harsh lines in there. And you can see how slow this is going. This isn't a quick process. This is just us waiting for this to load in. There we go. So that looks pretty awesome. Okay, let me fix some of my colors in here. I'm just going to go into Illustrator. And here's just a quick tip that you can do when you're picking colors. I'm just going to make a document 1280 by 720. I can do it on the same document there, but I just want to make a new one in case I decide to use it for something else. And we'll just wait for Illustrator to do its thinking. There we go. We'll turn off our transparency grid. I can create a couple cubes. There we go. So let's say 4. And then from here, let's say I'm using this color group. Okay, this is one I got from the color.adobe website. So I can just grab this and choose that for my color. Oops. Come on. There we go. Grab this one. This one. That one. And let me just scoot this up. I can grab one more of these. Grab that one. And I don't like the lines on these, so I'm just get rid of the strokes. There we go. Okay, so there's my color swatches. So I can just save this as colors. Yes, yes. It's all in the same layer, which is fine. And then I'm just going to import that colors right in here. And this is just as a piece of footage. I don't need the layers or anything fancy. It's just one picture, basically, of these colors. I can drop it in here. Give it a second. There it is. And then I'm just going to scoot it off to the side. Alright. So that now, as I choose colors for things, I can eyedrop this color in there. Okay. So we talked before about how we can adjust stuff inside of After Effects 2. We don't have to always go back to Illustrator. So here's my pale blue or pale background color. So I'm going to first adjust this because this is right here in Illustrator. So there's my background. Let's say I wanted it this color. So I just eyedrop it and there it is. Now if I want to change this red color on these, I can grab this item here and I can go to Effect, I can go to Color Correction, and I could go to Change Color. Okay, now this isn't a perfect way to do it, but just watch. Color to change. I want the red to change. Okay, now this again is picking the color of the red. So if I choose something down here, this is actually going to be a darker version of that. So I want to choose as close to pure red as I can, and I can actually just go in here and grab the actual red. And then just go to Hue Transform, and you can see how I can change this color. Okay, so you can see very quickly how I can adjust the coloration of that. Now in this case, it's not really going to give me something where I could say, you know, change this color to this color, but you can see what happens there. It's kind of neat how we can do that change color. So under color correction, there's other stuff. Change to color. Okay, from bright red, and then to, let's eyedrop that. Now it doesn't match perfectly because you see it says change hue. Well, I want to change hue, lightness, and saturation. There we go. And you'll see that the hue, saturation, and lightness of this red changed to that one. Now the text did disappear. There we go. Because it was set to setting to color, not transforming to color. Okay. So once that's done, now I could take this and copy it, and I could paste it onto these ones. And now all of those will have that color. Pretty neat. Okay, now we can also try, just for fun, undo that. I'm going to cut that off there. Just for fun, I'm going to do an adjustment layer. Okay, and you'll see that if I undo the adjustment layer, it is going to work on all 4 of these. So if I did want to change this after, I could just grab this and say I want this dark. And there it goes. Or grab this and say I want this bright. Okay, the purple is actually like a good color. It's a nice contrasty color. And then we could also play with some of these if it didn't pick the exact color. Okay, or if it wasn't picking, you can see there's a tiny red little line right there. Right? So I could play with that in order to get the exact coloration. Okay, or just going back to Illustrator and just coloring it that because we have the color right here. Okay, I could just copy it, paste it here just so I can get the color, or throw out my swatches or whatever. Delete that, and then we save it, and we go back to After Effects, and we don't need this adjustment layer now because I just changed it inside of Illustrator. I did save it. It's thinking. It's thinking. There it goes. Okay, so it just took a second to think. Okay, but we do get the option to be able to change it inside of After Effects by adjusting some of those colors. There we go. Now we do have other properties too that we can play with. I'm not going to go through all of them because again, a lot of these you're not going to remember me just talking about them, but we can play with like the diffuse, okay, which is how much of the color is coming from the color, basically just washing it out. But we can pull it back or brighten it up or whatever. The specular intensity is the shininess of it when it interacts with the light. So you can see how the color changes from obviously here where it's in the dark to there where it's hitting the light. Okay. Also shininess. I'm going to adjust that. You can pull the metal values down, and these will just help change how it's interacting with the light. And again, it just gives it a little bit different look. I like the way it was before, so I'm just going to undo those changes. I liked how that was. Okay. Now, even though these are 3D layers, we can still do effects to them just like we've done with changing color and all that. So what I'm going to do is on my medium solid here, because I zoomed in on accident, I'm going to add a generate. I'm going to do a 4-color gradient. Instead of this being just a solid color, it's not too bad. I'm going to go to this 4-color gradient, and I'm just going to pick these colors here. There we go. And so what this does is it creates, instead of just a solid gradient from left to right or top to bottom or on an angle, it's using each corner has a different color. And I could adjust the blend of all of these. Okay. I can also add some jitteriness, which adds a little bit of noise to it. Right. Now, if I hit this FX here, that turns off the effect. So you can see having that color change on there actually adds a little bit of warmth to this. Let's go to where we have more of an end shot, like that. Okay, so you can see we get a nice little result just by adjusting that 4-color pin. So it looks pretty neat, and you can see it looks 3D. And now we could go in here and take a camera. Oops. I don't need to actually delete it every time. I just keep doing that just so I don't confuse myself in having stuff I'm not playing with. Alright. And you'll see if I spin around too much, I'm seeing the background color and I lose that. So I never want to do that. So I'm going to just kind of stay in here and adjust it. Now the piece there is not moving at all. This is a 2D layer. It would just stay on top. The other stuff is 3D layers, so obviously it moves around. So I'm going to zoom out a touch. Maybe I'll get like that. I'm also going to come down to my solid and just scale it up a bit more. There we go. Okay, back to my camera. I'm going to go to my position and rotation, and I'm just going to rewind this, set a position and rotation keyframes, go to the end here. Oops. Now you'll notice that my camera is not actually like rotating down here. I meant to grab the other one, rewind it. There's a position and then there's a point of interest. That's what I want to keyframe. Okay, that's what the camera is essentially pointing at, is that. So now that I have point of interest keyframed and position keyframed, now I go to the end. Now I can go here, maybe zoom in a touch. In this case, the point of interest didn't get keyframed. It was just positioned. But now you'll see that we actually have a camera moving in our scene. Now some effects are going to be only 2D effects. So even though we've put them on a 3D layer, it's still a 2D effect on a 3D layer. So it's not like we could add like lightning and have lightning actually look 3D. It's going to be a flattened out version of lightning in there. And that's what a lot of the After Effects stuff is. They're just flattened out versions of 3D stuffs. So now you can see how we're getting this sign flipping as we kind of zoom into it. Okay. So this is just another fun assignment where you can really play around with a lot of different settings and really kind of customize this to what you want. I think I'm going to take this. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees like that. Just scaling it up, sliding it right at the bottom. Okay. Just go through. I'm going to save this. Okay, good. And then another thing that's going to help add to this, and obviously it's going to add to our render time, is having some motion blur on here. So my colors don't need to be motion blurred. There's no movement there. But my 4 objects here, not my background, there's no motion blur in that, does. So now that we kick that on, I've clicked, we wait. Now you can see there's a bit of motion blur on here, again, giving it just a nice little touch to make it look a little bit nicer. I'm going to pause the video, and then cache this out. Alright, so here it is, the finished product. And you can see that motion blur on here, or at the beginning obviously. Right there, you can see perfectly. Look at that, taco burrito. Cool. Alright, so the rest of this is just the same. File, come on. Export, add to render queue. We click on the word lossless. We choose QuickTime. We choose Format Options. And we choose H.264 from this list. It's already there. We go to our output 2, and we're saving this into that specific folder. Wonderful, and then we hit render, and then we're good. All right, so there we go. Enjoy that assignment.